Welcome back to Rich Dad Stockcast. I'm your host, Denney, and today's episode is a special one. We're diving into the real behind-the-scenes lessons learned directly from Robert and Kim Kiyosaki, not just from the books, but from conversations, mentorship, and real-world experience. These are insights that most people will never hear unless they're in the room. But today, you get to hear them directly from someone who's been there, Rich Dad expert Andy Tanner. And if you're serious about applying what the rich actually do, not just what they say, make sure you go to stockcastbonus.com. You'll get free training and tools to help you take control of your financial future. Now, let's jump in. Andy, welcome back to the show.
This is I wouldn't call it a curveball topic, but not something. This will be fun to just find out what questions you have and just answer them, because I've spent so much time and such a significant part of my life in financial education. Robert Kiyosaki and Kim Kiyosaki, there's just no question. The mentorship and the things they gave me, absolutely life-changing, life-defining, really, for me. We'll see if I can get through this without blubbering and gratituding and all that stuff, because they really have. So I'll have to start jogging my memory, not because I'd have to think of what they've taught me, but what to put out first and what's most important, and categorize it, because this could be a 5-week podcast or more. So many wonderful lessons. So I'll do my very best.
I can't wait to dig into that. I love behind the scenes, and I love hearing your stories. But before we jump into that, stockcastbonus.com, we mentioned it briefly here just a second ago. There's always powerful tools and resources. It's getting updated all the time. Can you tell the listeners a little bit more what happens when they go to stockcastbonus.com?
Yeah, stockcastbonus.com is to help people act and do things. It's to help people get a recipe where they can balance the content they consume and balance that up with some action they can take. Most people know that it's when you actually click your mouse and buy the stock that you have a chance to make money or lose money, right? Most people know when you actually buy the real estate is when you have a chance to lose money or make money. So action is so important. And there's no shortage of content that should be consumed. I mean, you always want to be learning. I know I do. But StockcastBonus.com, particularly the free downloads and ebooks that are available there, they really give people recipes for people who want to organize themselves and do things, and bring habits into their life that are going to make a major, major difference. And a lot of those resources there are no charge. So if you like this channel, you subscribe to this channel, you should consider the opportunity of having structured lessons, recipes, things like that. So stockcastbonus.com.
There you go. All right, so let's talk Robert Kim Kiyosaki. Let's start with Robert first. You've worked closely with him for years. I know this is a loaded question here. What's one of the most powerful lessons he taught you about wealth and how the world really works?
Probably not what people would think. Of course, we can get to the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which was my first exposure to Robert, and we can get to that. So we certainly, a book that has sold 40 million copies in 93 languages. It's got some stuff in there that was my first exposure before I met him. I, just like everybody else, I read the book too, and absolutely changed the way I thought about things. Really helped the context. But I'll tell you a story, and I think this encapsulates. I hope I honor Robert in saying this. I hope he wouldn't disagree. When I first met Robert face to face, it was in Phoenix, Arizona, at an event called The Psychology of Winning. It was about how people thought. And I gave a speech on 401ks, and he was very complimentary. And that's the first time, really on our first meeting, where he talked about needing a paper assets advisor. It was the one asset class they didn't have someone that understood Rich Dad philosophy and could apply it to that asset class. So we started talking, and he really liked this speech on 401ks, and I'd been writing a little book on it called 401 Chaos. I've been working on that project, and so I flew down to Phoenix for something a little bit special. There was a person in my church group. I was in charge of mentoring teenagers, age 12 up to 18. That's 17, I should say. When they turned 18, we kicked them out. Uh, one of these students, he was a junior in high school, so he's 16 years old, and he was supposed to write a paper for what he wanted to become when he grew up. And he wanted to be an investor, and he didn't know any. And I guess he figured I was the closest. He didn't know a lot about what I did. And he says, "Don't you invest some?" And I says, "Yeah." He says, I'd like to interview you for this school paper. I have to interview someone who does the job I want. I said, if your parents were okay with it, I'm headed down to Phoenix. I could get you maybe a better interview than me. Let me see what I can do. So his name was Jackson. Absolutely crushed it in crypto. Actually, he had put money in even as a teenager in the crypto, and he absolutely he set himself up the rest of his life. But anyway, before that, when he was just in high school, he went down to with me. His parents said, "Oh, we'd love to have you taken with you." So I had him interview with Robert, and Robert talked to him about spirit. That's an interesting thing. Entrepreneurs and investors, it is a journey of personal development. If you read the book, especially chapter 8 and chapter 20 of The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham, Warren Buffett's, for lack of a better term, rich dad, his mentor, you'll learn that temperament and psychology and how you think about things really, really matters as an investor. And you'll find that human nature grinds against wealth much of the time, much of the habits that are inborn in us, much of the fear of loss that's inborn in us, much of the laziness or the inconsistency. And I would say really top of the list probably is fear. If you could live your life without fear, boy, how would that change, what you'd be able to do if you didn't have that false evidence appearing real, sometimes real evidence appearing real in your face. And Robert talked with Jackson about spirit. And there's a book called As a Man Thinketh, and he quoted this, and it goes something like this: when spirit rises and commands, the gods are ready to obey. And I would say Robert Kiyosaki is he is an unstoppable force. He has a spirit, very strong individual in terms of his goals and just imposing his will on the world as an investor, saying, "Look, I'm going to have assets, and whatever challenges stand in the way." His formative experience, not only with his rich dad, but I think his experience with the Marine Corps. He hasn't been discharged in his mind. He is a Marine through and through. And he would tell stories about being in his gunship, in his helicopter. And he said, these 50 caliber anti-aircraft guns, he says they look like miniature Coke bottles coming up at you. They slow down a little bit, but they're still fast enough to get you. And he says, being shot down, I think he crashed 3 times. There's a picture of him someone took in the rescue, getting him into the water. I mean, just incredible stories. That type of spirit, I think, is number one. I think of all the things, when I sat and listened to him counsel Jackson, he didn't talk about balance sheets. He didn't talk about income statements. He talked about spirit. And I think that was the biggest surprise and also the biggest help to me, because I did not have a strong spirit. And he actually told me that. He says, work on your spirit. He says, I don't feel like you have a strong enough spirit to be where you want to go. He says, it's not going to be about, learning. You understand stocks pretty well, but you're going to have to really have a spirit to get to where you want to go next. So I worked on my spirit a lot to make it stronger. So I'd say that's number one, Dell. Just like in a man thinketh, when spirit rises and commands, the gods are ready to obey. That little quip, that little quote is powerful. It speaks to the alignment, not that you be fighting gods, but the alignment of generalized principles. And it takes spirit to do that.
Hmm. That's fantastic. I have to say just a little anecdote as well to that about spirit and maybe law of attraction or whatever we want to call it too. I You and I have known each other before you had this relationship with Robert. And
Yeah.
I remember one experience very vividly. I don't know if I've even told you this, but I remember exactly where we were. We were traveling. You were sitting in the front seat because you're 8 feet tall and you needed to stretch out. I was sitting behind you and we were talking about the book Rich Dad Poor Dad and your energy and your passion for it. You were quoting out of it, which kind of set me on fire with this as well. And it's just interesting how much you loved and you enjoyed it and you talked about it. And then fast forward to where we're at now, it's just amazing. So I
Yeah.
think your spirit really came to light here. So
It's hard to believe I talk to friends like you say, yeah, I remember 25 years ago when we did this or that. It just seems like it's not that long ago, but it's wonderful. So yeah, when spirit rises and commands, the gods are ready to obey. And it really starts, you hear of this thing called the entrepreneurial spirit or the investor spirit or the spirit of free will or the desire. In the book Think and Grow Rich, this is described as what's called a burning desire, a deep desire, not just oh yeah, I wish I win the lottery, but someone who's really cares about enough that the amount of action actually is more, maybe even than just the amount of dreaming. They probably do more about their dreams than just think about them. It drives spirit, desire, whatever you want to call it. It causes massive action. And it's a big part of it. Big part of it. And also, that's a plug for Stockcast bonus. Now that I think about it, because that's where you'd go to really, oh, I really want to be wealthy. Okay, well, have you gotten free resources that are there? Oh, well, not yet. Well, that says you're not really, serious. But if you say, yeah, I'm on board. I want to learn everything. Then that tells you where your spirit's at. So it's a big deal.
really good point. Um, with I remember going back with that. You read the books, you were on fire, it sets you on fire. It's exciting, but you've got this opportunity to actually speak with the author, get to know the author, understand him. Can you share a moment or a conversation with Robert that really stuck with you? Something that hit deeper than the books?
Oh, geez. I've had weird experiences. I remember one time in Peru, Robert, myself, him and gold expert Mike Maloney were in an elevator and it broke down. We were in an elevator for about 3 hours. And I just remember I mean, I'm a big dude. I took up more than my share of that elevator. I took a picture of us. Barely, you can't even see all of us because it's this tiny elevator. And it was kind of interesting how strong Kim was and how relaxed she was. Because we're up high, we're in an elevator here and there. You could tell they had a hand crank or something because it was going up about a quarter inch at a time as they were hand cranking it up where it needed to be. But I've had so many experiences teaching wise with those guys. One of the important ones was down in Phoenix, where for the first time, he began to talk to me about generalized principles. So once you have a spirit, what you try to do is bridle it a little bit. This is what Robert would call the discipline of the military. To be able to do the things that need to be done, whether a person necessarily feels inclined in that moment or not. Discipline. But you align yourself with generalized principles. And Jeff Bezos said this. He said the same thing. He said a lot of people are trying to figure out what's going to change. The smart people figure out what's going to stay the same, and you build your house on that. If you want to predict the future, uh, just categorize the things you know will happen. For example, I know that time will pass. Time is so constant and so consistent. I can make predictions and be right every time. about time. I know that there'll be a 2026. I know when it's going to happen. I can tell you the dates, January 1st. I even know when 2027 will start. I can do that with any year you want. I can tell you when it's going to come, how far out it is. And so I make a lot of my money based on the movement of time. If you think about rent, it's per month. If you think about dividends, they're per quarter. And so you have this tie of the income you make to the passage of time. And that's a lot simpler than trying to guess prices that are very unpredictable. And so cash flow academy, almost ever options expire. And I can tell you the day on which that option will expire. I can even calculate things called theta, which is really time decay. And I can do that in a very deliberate manner. Time decay, unlike volatility, unlike what we call vega, and unlike price movement, what we call delta, time decay theta always moves the same direction. So a large portion, the vast majority of the passive income I enjoy in my life comes from the passage of time, because that's a generalized principles. Buckminster Fuller outlined a bunch that he observed. I've had a few that I've just noticed in my life. But when you can align yourself with generalized principles and understand what those generalized principles are, then you see them working in the world, and you can align yourself with them as you see them working in the world. And that's the challenge of it, because I become misaligned because I'm a human being. And that's why the development of the soul of the person, to be able to align with what works, that's it. I mean, that's the gig. And so that was a huge one. Is you begin with the spirit that's just indomitable, that's just absolutely competitive, and not against the world, but against yourself. We've met the enemy, and he is us. Thalassomelitis, know thyself, and know the world you're in, and the generalized principles. That's a huge one. When he taught us that, and that really hit home to me. And I thought, wow, do I have a lot of room for improvement? So that was another really important lesson, generalized principles.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm thinking myself about how much more I need to learn about generalized principles as you're saying that. Let's
Discover them, yeah.
let's do this. Let's take a quick break. Some of the lessons from Robert Kiyosaki that we've talked about so far, I would say, are game changing. I love this. Now, when we
Life
come
changing.
life changing, right? Now, when we come back, we're going to shift gears and talk about Kim Kiyosaki. She has her
Man.
own unique and powerful perspective on wealth, especially when it comes to independence and ownership
And
and
women.
long-term thinking. And as always, make sure you head over to stockcastbonus.com. Grab your free resources we put together for you. If you want to apply what you're learning today, that's the best place to start. Stick around. We'll be right back.
So far, it's been great. I needed a source where I could really enrich my education through stocks. I didn't really have an avenue for it, and it's helped me a lot. The simplicity has really gotten me on the track to where I enjoy the learning, as well as it's really solidifying in my mind. And they're not just trying to sell you something, they really care about the people that are in the course, and they really do care about you and your personal goals, and what you want to do is to help you and your family and whatever your goals are in life through that. So it's really been great.
Welcome back to Rich Dad Stockcast. We talked about Robert. Now let's talk about Kim Kiyosaki. Andy, what's something she taught you that really shaped your own approach to investing and independence?
Well, first, let me speak to Kim as an individual. I absolutely love this person. She is one of one of her best friends, Kim and Mona. Mona is she helps with the publishing, and Rich Dad is a huge book business. I mean, just still, the people still read this book and hear about it, and it's still an extremely best-selling book around the world. But Kim and Mona, I mean, talk about ladies that are just positive. To speak with Kim is to look for positivity. It's incredible. Even when you call her on the phone, if you get her voicemail, she reminds you, leave me a message, especially if it's something good. is what it says on her voicemail. Kim here, leave me a message, especially if it's good news, especially if it's something good. Constantly positive. I mean, just unbreakably positive. And so I just love her spirit that way. She brings so much. Um, she's the yin to Robert's yang, or yang to yin. I don't know which one goes where, but they absolutely incredible. The other thing about Kim is and this is something her and Robert have in common, absolutely insatiable learner, never satisfied with what she knows, a complete student all the time, very much a listener. When someone comes in that knows about a topic and she senses that, she just goes into learning mode, locks it in, and always willing to learn, never taking the position that she thinks she knows everything, which is strange because she knows so much. I used to joke and kind of give Robert a hard time when I'd take the stage, and I'd say, look, everybody knows who the brains is around here, because she is wicked smart, disciplined, active, youthful, just a tremendous human being, both of them. And so to speak to her spirit is worth mentioning too. Now, to the question of lesson, this one I have to be careful with, because I one of the strengths and weaknesses I have is both, is I tend to wear my emotions on my sleeve. And there's nothing wrong with emotion. I mean, when you break that word down, it moves you. I was moved by this. When someone says I was struck by this or I was moved by it, that's that spirit being touched and guided, and you feel almost a magnetic force pulling you somewhere. I was moved by this. So sometimes I'll shed a tear like that, and then people roll their eyes, and what a big mushy, wimpy, emasculated guy. So I've done a lot better job in controlling my emotions. When I talk about Kim, it's hard to do that for me. She changed my life. The Cashflow Academy exists because of Kim Kiyosaki. No question about it. Would not be here without her. No way. I would give a lot of speeches. You remember back in the day, you and I would travel together, and we would give speeches all over the place. I've been everywhere. And one time we were in Las Vegas, we had 98,000 people on a live stream, almost 100,000 people in one shot. And we were streaming this from Las Vegas. We had tons of speakers there. I was going to talk about stocks. And I mentioned to Kim, wow, this is probably the biggest crowd I've spoken to. You think about this like speaking to the Rose Bowl. It's a big crowd. And she pulled me aside and she said, Andy, I'm going to share with you a generalized principle called ephemeralization. And I didn't know what ephemeralization was. And ephemeralization is really learning to do more with less, and more with less. And here's a concept that's really important. Leverage is like this. Let's say what a lever does, you give me a lever long enough, I can move the world, right? You can do more with less. So for example, in real estate, if you pay cash, that's doing more with a lot. But if you get a down payment, you're doing more with less. If you're like a Kenny McElroy or a Than Merrill, you do even more with even less until you do everything with nothing. There's a trend, more with less, more less, more less, more less, more less, until everything is done with nothing. That's the trend. And that process is called ephemeralization. If you're Kenny McElroy or Than Merrill, you not only do the down payment, you borrow that too. So essentially what's odd is Kenny runs his business as if he had no money. So when they say, well, it takes money to make money, well, not necessarily. It's not your money that has to be used. So his whole business model is based on as if he were a homeless guy with nothing. He does everything with nothing. Isn't that interesting? Even the talent, he has a team that surrounds him that does things he could never do. And so Kim talked to me about that. She said, I'd quipped about this 98,000 people. I go, wow, I've had big crowds before, but 100,000 people is a big crowd. And she said, Andy, it's nothing compared to what the world is. And she says, you should learn to do more with less. And then she says, you should create artifacts, was the second thing she said. Rather than, speaking to groups of 1,000 or 700, or in this case, 98,000, says that's a drop in the bucket. This is a woman who's traveled the world and spoken to millions over her life. And over time after that, I joined her and spoke to a lot of stages. But she said, you can touch more people. And that's where the Cashflow Academy came from. It was a way to use technology, the internet, to reach a far greater, to do a lot more with a lot less. And I'll just, how do you thank someone for a life changing? I'd had started businesses before. Some succeeded, some were miserable freaking failures. But that lesson, I remember where we were. I remember where we were standing in that ballroom at the side from everyone, and she gave me that little talking to, not even a talking to, just more of an inspiration. And talk about someone who has always encouraged, always been positive. Absolutely, I'm in her debt for forever. She's taught me every bit as much as anyone else has. Great mentor, great friend.
I love that so much. I feel like there's so much more we need to dig in here. And I'm gonna say this, I'm gonna talk to the listener here for a second. If you like what we've talked about, we're getting kind of crunched on time, but you want to see a part two to this, throw in the comments part two. Maybe we'll open up another episode for this.
Oh, we could do. I said we do 25 hours of this
Part
stuff.
25.
I
Okay.
spent, I spent 14 years traveling the world with these guys, and the lessons, and my journal is just unbelievable. It is unbelievable how much those guys know, and that whole team, what they've given me in my life. It's just it's just even hard to start the conversations. Where do you even start? It is. I'll finish with one thing if we can go over a little over time. My wife and I tell this story often. I think it's relevant here. My wife and I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and we failed. We couldn't buy assets. We didn't know what we were doing. We went out to buy houses. We were going to be real estate tycoons. And on a second reading, people have heard me tell this story a lot. Is she said, "Well, we must have missed something. We read Rich Dad Poor Dad. We didn't get rich. We're supposed to buy assets. We don't have any. We just didn't know how to do it the right way, right?" Anyway, my wife and I, we have no assets. We're failing. Read that we go to reread it, and she says, "I think I got what we missed." I said, "What's that?" She goes, "Look at the cover. The answer's there. It's Rich Dad Poor Dad." Then she told a little joke. We already have the poor dads. We're halfway there. Great poor dads. My own father, my beloved late father-in-law. Great good men, not financial educators by any stretch of the imagination. Just good men for ethics and goodness and service, but not financial education. We stopped looking for deals and we started looking for people. And that is a huge lesson taught indirectly on that cover, directly, and I just missed it, to where I look at the fortunate, just the sheer luck of hanging out with those people for all these years. It's irreplaceable. It's unspeakable. So Robert had his rich dad. Robert had his rich dad. Warren Buffett had Benjamin Graham. You can go down the list of people, and it's very difficult to look at any. I've had a good balance of success and failure in my life. It's been a really good balance. I could tell a lot of good stories and a lot of rough ones, but I will tell you, the people, when you start looking for people instead of deals, life changes real quick. It's really cool stuff.
That's awesome. Andy, this has been powerful information today. That I think this is a good chance to end this podcast and say, hey, there's more to come. We have to do more than this. So let's this, most people, they never get a chance to learn from Robert and Kim Kiyosaki directly, but listeners, you just got a front row seat through Andy Tanner here. Now, if this episode opened up your eyes, don't just nod and move on. Take action, as Andy always says. Go to stockcastbonus.com, grab your tools. They're waiting for you there. You're only one decision away from moving closer to financial freedom. And if you got value from this conversation, make sure you like, subscribe, share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. You're not here by accident. You're building something that most people won't. Stay smart, stay invested, and we'll see you next time.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.